Hello, ladies and gentlemen, dear viewers of the Media Informed channel. I have a privilege to announce my today's special guest, who is serving as Secretary General of the Austrian Division of PanEuropean Uinon, which actually promotes European integration, promotes European values across European continent. Good afternoon, Mr. Klochik. I'm very happy to see you here.
Great to see you.
Thank you, Mr. Klochik. So I think that our last interview, I suppose, was several months ago. So now we have 6 months from the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine, 6 months from Russian invasion into Ukraine. And now many things have been, let's say, clarified. And we see that there is a strong support in the Western Europe towards Ukraine. And there is a perception that this support is equal around all the corners, around all the states, equal support towards Ukraine. But sometimes in different publications, I meet information that Austria, unfortunately, is not so dedicated for the support for Ukraine. Obviously, Austria is doing its best to support Ukrainian refugees, and Ukrainians are very grateful for the support that the Austrian people and the Austrian government provide to Ukrainian refugees who had to settle in Austria temporarily due to the war caused by Russia. But let's say if we compare the level of support which are provided by our close allies like Poland, Britain, United States, with the support which Austria provides, unfortunately, Austria is lagging behind. You are a very experienced person and you have many connections even among Austrian political elite. So I want you to be, let's say, straight and explicit about the situation. So what is the perception in the Austrian elite of this conflict between Russia and Ukraine, and why Austrian politicians are traditionally so Russian-oriented?
Good question. I mean, it's a fact that Russia once had occupied a part of Austria after World War II. And in 1995, when Austria got its status of neutrality, we developed this story that by neutrality, the Russians will leave us alone, and we can develop good relations via economic ties. Austria was one of the first countries which opened the market for Russian oil and gas. A few years ago, we celebrated 50 years of this cooperation. And at the same time, in the Cold War, Vienna was a meeting point for both sides. So this is very deeply rooted in Austrian society, and especially political society, being the neutral part in this East-West conflict. And the war started by Putin against Ukraine reminds several people again on this division between East and West. And on the good old times, let's say it this way, and I think you can interpret what I mean with saying that, that we should be neutral between both sides. The second point is that Austria is depending on Russian gas. 80% of our gas comes from Russia, and the winter is coming, and people are afraid that they will freeze in their homes in winter this year. So the political elite has still some kind of good, or tries to have some kind of good relation to Russia, although, and I have to say that even especially the chancellor and the government are at least rhetorically supporting Ukraine. I mean, Austria cannot deliver weapons.
Yeah, I will sound very provocative, but I think that I should ask you this question. So you are the Secretary General of the Austrian Division of PanEuropean Uinon. PanEuropean Uinon obviously, let's say, promotes the peaceful settlement of all conflicts on the European continent. And obviously, you can't say different things, because then actually PanEuropean Uinon will stop to exist if it will promote another way of, let's say, solution, settlement, etc. But at the same time, we understand that there are some conflicts which can't be peacefully settled. So there is no, let's say, middle solutions sometimes. So sometimes you have to fight till the end in order, if you want, let's say, to omit the conflicts in the future. Obviously, you sacrifice many things, people die, but at the end of the day, let's say you lost some people, but at the end of the day, you know that in the future you will save some new lives. So this is a moral. Always there is a moral question. You know, what is better, to save now, let's say, some lives, or to finish the conflict by the war and let's say finish all conflicts forever. I'm talking about Russian invasion to Ukraine. Obviously, there are some organization in Europe, like your organization, which calls for peaceful settlement, but we understand that it's not possible, because if Ukraine will agree with a peaceful settlement, which actually Russia is very interested in, it will mean that Ukraine soon will be again suffering from Russian invasion, and Russia will try to, let's say, scratch each time new Ukrainian territories. So we have to find it then. And this logic contradicts your organization. So what is the solution? Either you can reconsider your principles, or your organization is outdated. So where is your place in the real world? I'm sorry for asking you this direct question.
No, it's always good to get direct questions, and even if it sounds provocative. What I said before was an explanation of why does Austria, the country, the government, the political elite, act as it acts. The Pan-European Union is not a pacifistic organization. Maybe there is a misunderstanding. I mean, even the founder, when he created this organization almost 100 years ago, he said there is always one thing you have to fight for, and this is your freedom, personal freedom, but also the freedom of your country. And the position of the Pan-European Union is very clear on the side of Ukraine, and especially we in Austria, the Pan-European movement in Austria, have our, I don't want to say conflicts, but discussions with representatives of political parties, because we say that we, even Austria, which is neutral, should support Ukraine much more. And I'm sure that, of course, it would be better if we can find a peaceful solution, but there is no peaceful solution as long as the aggressor is not ready to give up his war. Putin is not ready to negotiate about peace. He wants to destroy Ukraine. And if somebody wants to destroy you, you have to defend yourself. That's very clear for us.
Mr. Klitschko, Ukrainian refugees are settling in Austria, and you know, some people come back to Ukraine, some people come to Austria. I know many, let's say, rich families, Ukrainian families, who, and why I'm talking about rich people, because, well, this is life. Rich people usually have more opportunities than poor people. This is life. So some rich families, they left Ukraine after an invasion, and now they came back to Ukraine for some reasons. But some people, they sell out their businesses in Ukraine and go, for instance, to Austria. I know such examples, even from Odessa. At the same time, we understand that now, you know, let's be frankly, you know, for Austrian people in their majority, let's say, Russian invasion into Ukraine is not their priority. Obviously, there are many people who support Ukrainian refugees, but usually people think about themselves everywhere, in Ukraine, in Austria, in Britain, everywhere. This is a human nature. And the majority of Austrians, they, let's say, I think they're, you know, becoming, you know, not comfortable with this situation. especially with the fact that somebody, let's say, pretends to get their jobs, or government cares about newcomers who came from Ukraine, because Austrians don't understand what does it mean when Russia destroy your houses, homes, etc. This is not the case only for Austria. I read in Guardian the same situation is in Britain, everywhere. It's everywhere. Obviously, due to the political correctness, you can't say this publicly. This is, let's say, a kind of cancel culture. When you can't say something publicly, because then it will be, let's say, you will be punished. You can't say something publicly. But still, you can't ban people or forbid people to think about something or to be annoyed about something. So, how, let's say, Austrian government, let's say, solves the situation, how Austrian government communicates to Austrians in order to, let's say, teach Austrians why now we need to support Ukrainians, why it's important, even for our sake.
Well, if there is a communication coming from our government to explain to the people why we have to support Ukraine, then it's the known argument that the Ukraine is defending the freedom of Europe, and it is a humanitarian duty to support people who have to leave the country because their houses are destroyed. I think the Austrian population is still very supportive for Ukraine. To give you an example, 2 weeks ago, a friend of mine organized a charity event, and a lot of people have been there and donated some kind of money. At the same time, you have every week some kind of bigger demonstrations where also Austrians and other people support the Ukrainians to keep this information flowing, what's going on in Ukraine, and to be sure that people in Austria can support Ukraine.
Another important question, which was raised by President Zelensky, President of Ukraine, about visa restrictions towards Russia. This discussion, it came up from our interview in Washington Post, which was given by our president when he called for Westerns to restrict the Russians coming to Europe and expel Russians who settled in Europe back to Russia. And this was a very controversial topic because there were many Russian refugees who actually stood against Russian invasion into Ukraine, and they had to flee from their country because of their political position. And it seems that that's why President of Ukraine, President Zelensky, he walked away from this thesis, and in his speech, he actually called to separate people who stood against the war and to provide them refugee status, while people who, let's say, go for a journey, for a trip to Europe, they have to receive restrictions, and they have to meet. They have to be restricted from coming to Europe. And again, and this question, visa restrictions, this is a very discussable question in Europe. You see, because there is a German view, French view, and, for instance, Baltic view and Polish view. We see that there is a huge distance in the views inside European Union. So it obviously affects a European coherence in terms of, let's say, fighting Russia. Because when Russia sees that there is a room for, let's say, playing cards across different European interests, then obviously Russia tries to do this. So what is your position as Secretary General of the Pan-European Union about visa restrictions towards Russian citizens? Should Russian citizens overall be a responsibility for their government's decision?
This is a very, very hard question because, I mean, on what kind of basis are you going to make a decision if somebody gets a visa? How can you check if somebody is supporting Putin or is not supporting Putin? Yeah? I have no idea how to deal with that problem. Yeah, I would like to hear an argument why we should close the borders for every Russian. I never heard such an argument why we should do that. I mean, you can, of course, you can say, okay, you are Russian, so you belong to Putin, and this means Putin is bad, which is true, yeah, and therefore you have to stand for him. But I think this is not the correct approach, because you are Ukrainian, of course you defend your country, but that does not mean that you are supporting Zelensky in all the decisions he makes or he made before. Where is the way to find some kind of differentiation in the argumentation and the treatment of people? So this is very, very tricky, this idea to stop Russians to travel to Europe. I mean, what is clear is that we have sanctions against certain people in the system of Putin. And in this case, we should be really strict.
There is, the set of rules in the European Union which falls under the scope of EU internal market rules, the free movement of people. And because, I actually prepared my PhD thesis and the articles on this topic, I know for sure that there is, let's say, a rule of personal conduct in the European Union. So you can't punish the person because he belongs, for instance, to some organization, maybe a religious organization. You only can judge the person on the ground of personal conduct if his personal behavior, let's say, represent a danger for public safety. Then you can restrict or forbid a person to settle in your country. So in some way, obviously, this affects EU rules as well. Maybe EU rules have to be adjusted according to, let's say, the situation, because in life you have to be flexible if you want to prosper. Maybe the same is about organization. European Union has to become more flexible if European Union wants to address challenges from the countries like Russia, which think that they can abandon international law when they, let's say, when they think that this is profitable for them.
Well, maybe we have to change the rules, but in that case, we need good arguments why we should change that rules. And to repeat it, I personally do not see a good argument why we have to blame all Russian citizens for what their government does.
You have the partnering division of PanEuropean Union in Ukraine. How is the situation in the Ukrainian branch of PanEuropean Union? What this branch is doing in terms of, let's say, new reality? And obviously, I would like you to share your ideas on the event, which is going to be in the fall of this year. Let's say anniversary, 100 years since the establishment of PanEuropean Union. I know that you started to prepare for this event last year, a year before. So we even discussed it privately, this event. So please tell the audience more about this event.
Ukraine is in a very special situation, because all the men who are active in PanEuropa, or many of them, are now in the army, joining the army, or had to join the army, are defending their country. So it's everything is in the hands of the ladies there. And I'm proud to say that we have a good group of especially young ladies from Ukraine who are very active. Of course, at the moment, especially in humanitarian aid and organizing support for Ukraine. But also, they are very helpful in promoting this conference we will have in November, 17th to 20th of November, on the 100th anniversary of the founding of the Pan-European Union. I mean, of course, we will discuss a little bit about the history of our organization, but especially we want to discuss the challenges we have. And one of the points we will focus on will not only be Ukraine, but also especially the question of a European security and foreign policy, because I think that's the challenge we have to face, and we have to do something. We have to come forward. What Putin tries is to split Europe, and this must not happen. Otherwise, he wins not only the war, but also destroys Europe, and this cannot be in our interest.
American scientist Nassim Taleb used to write his famous book, Black Swan. When he judged, there are black swans which come up, so some events which come up unexpectedly, and they turn around the situation. You know this theory. So Ukraine has received the status of the EU candidate state, and be frankly, Ukraine wouldn't get this if there was no Russian invasion. And obviously, Macron, president of France, he argued this publicly on a TV interview that Ukraine wouldn't get the status if there was no Russian invasion. So now Ukraine is a candidate state, which means that now Ukraine has a real perspective to join the European Union, because before the war, European Union didn't want to, let's say, talk precisely about integration to European Union, just limiting itself to the discussions about the fact that the Ukraine belongs to the European family. So it's a very broad thesis. Prime Minister Denis Shmyhal, Prime Minister of Ukraine, he suggested recently that Ukraine can join European Union by the end of 2024. A very ambitious goal, actually, because many Balkan states which have this status, they are waiting beside the door during the last 20 years to join the European Union, except Croatia, who joined in 2014. So my question would be the following. So how can you assess Ukrainian chances to become a member of the European Union, let's say, in terms of special circumstances? Let's say Ukraine win the victory, win the war, there is a victory, Ukraine returns back all occupied by Russia Ukrainian territories. So Ukraine is a victorious state with a strong army. Which might be useful for European Union to have such a country inside. So what are the chances of Ukraine to join European Union? Because we understand, sorry for a very long introduction, we understand that this is a question of Ukrainian membership in the European Union. This is a political question. If we look through the EU Commission report on Georgia, we will see that Georgia has the same progress in reforms as Ukraine. But there was a political decision to leave Georgia aside and to grant to Ukraine and Moldova, due to political reasons, this status. So how can you assess, let's say, political chances that Ukraine might get this membership status by the end of 2024, or let's say at the latest 2025?
Well, the end of 2024 is in 2 years, and that's completely unrealistic to be a member in the European Union. Even Austria, which was in a completely other situation than Ukraine is now, it took longer than only 2 years to complete this full process of all the negotiations and then join the European Union. So this takes time, this takes reforms, this takes also the political will, as you mentioned, in the European Union countries. And we have to face the fact that without that war, you mentioned it, Ukraine would not have the status of candidate country, because before Ukraine was in the so-called neighborhood policy, which excluded the accession to the European Union. What changed was the will of the European countries to support Ukraine, because I think political leaders realized that if Putin wins this war and destroys Ukraine, this would be a big threat also to Europe and the rest of Europe, because he would not stop. And therefore, this symbolic status of candidate status for Ukraine. What is necessary now is to work on that status, and I mean that means especially good information about Ukraine in all the EU countries, because you have to face the fact, and I mentioned that in my first answer, when explaining why are people sometimes very slow in accepting what's happening in Ukraine. We still have a big amount of many people who grew up during the Cold War, and for them Ukraine has always been part of Russia. So we have to convince all the people and explain this history of an independent Ukraine. That is what I think is very important, not only the fact that I hope that you can win this war with the support of the Europeans and of course the Americans, because without of them, Europe is not strong enough to support Ukraine.
Mr. Kochik, I'm very grateful for your time, for your dedication to give this interview. And for an audience, would like to remind that today we hosted our special guest, Secretary General of Austrian Division of PanEuropean Uinon, which will celebrate 100 years anniversary in the fall of this year. Thank you very much, Mr. Kochik, and wish you a nice day.
Have a great day. Do побачення.